Ladies and gentlemen, on tonight's Air Raid Hour, we are recapping everything from Bills Chiefs yesterday in Arrowhead, the offsides call heard around the world, talking about what lies ahead a little bit for the Bills, going through the offensive and defensive performances, and a quick look around the AFC playoff picture with now 6 teams sitting at 7-6. But first,
Welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in everyone to the Air Raid Hour Monday night here, 9 p.m. on the Cover One Sports Network. I am your host, David Tilton. You can find me on Twitter at Tilt Money. Judge will not be joining us tonight. He is shaping the lives of America's youth tonight. He's got some commitments at his job, and we will be talking with you all tonight in the comments section about the game yesterday. And look, right off the top, I know the entire national media narrative and talking points today have been about the offsides call on Kadarius Toney, and we will talk about that. But it is so typical, isn't it, that the Bills get a big road win, and of course the focus is not on them. The focus is on the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Kadarius Toney, and rather than the storyline being the Bills beating the Chiefs in Arrowhead for the third straight time in the regular season, and by the way, having played now the Chiefs 5 straight times in Arrowhead, counting the 2 playoff games, we're instead talking about the Kadarius Toney offsides play. And we'll get to that a bit as we kind of get into talking about the Bills defense. But welcome in everyone tonight. Going to be a lot of fun to talk about this Bills win. Always better to have these shows on Mondays after a big Bills win. And so we will have a fun time tonight. We'll get the comment section involved quite a bit. And obviously there are 2 Monday night games going on right now, notably of interest for the Bills. The Miami Dolphins are playing the Tennessee Titans right now, hoping for potentially a Titans win. It looks like Tyreek Hill might have injured his ankle in the game. Don't know if he'll be back in the game or not, but obviously something big to keep an eye on as we kind of progress between weeks here. If Tyreek Hill has a ankle injury that potentially keeps him out, we'll see. Again, just happened moments ago. Don't really know the severity of that. So interesting times around the AFC, and it really is kind of a game of attrition right now. If you kind of look around the landscape of the AFC, and as we get to kind of into our show topics tonight and talking about our biggest takeaways from the game, I want to hear what you all think about this game and what your singular biggest takeaway was as we kind of just take a quick look at the AFC, the AFC conference standings here. And while the Bills do win and get the much needed win, they still sit in 11th place in the AFC. They entered the week in 11th place in the AFC, and it looks like they will leave the week in 11th place in the AFC, but it is a different feeling 11th place in the AFC than it was a week ago at 6-6, a bunch of teams ahead of them in the win column. This week, things look a little bit different. The Steelers lose on Thursday night to the Patriots, dropping them to 7-6. Other teams around the AFC, like the Houston Texans, losing to the New York Jets yesterday. The Cincinnati Bengals taking care of business against the Indianapolis Colts, which obviously kind of put the Bills in a predicament, but gets the Bengals up to 7-6, but also drop the Colts down to 7-6. The Broncos do get a win against the Chargers, which obviously didn't help things for the Bills, and Justin Herbert leaves that game, and we'll talk about that as we get to our looking ahead segment at the end, what that might mean for the Bills when they square off with the Chargers here in a few weeks. And otherwise, the only other game that really didn't go the Bills' way was the Jaguars losing to the Cleveland Browns, which vaulted the Browns up to 8-5. Had the Jags won that game, the Browns would have also been in that muddle of 7-6 teams. But as it stands, there are 6 teams sitting at 7-6 in the AFC, and that goes all the way up to the currently number 6 seeded Pittsburgh Steelers in the AFC playoff race. So you have 2 teams right now that are 7-6 that are in the playoffs as of today, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Indianapolis Colts, and 4 other teams at 7-6: the Houston Texans, Denver Broncos, Bengals, and the Buffalo Bills. Chargers dropping to 5-8. It's going to be a tough road ahead for them, especially with Justin Herbert already being determined that he's not going to play this Thursday against the Raiders. Both of those teams are 5-8, so this is pretty much a must-win game for both of those 2 teams if they have any chance. The Patriots eliminated from the playoffs, them and the Panthers, technically the only 2 teams who have been eliminated from the playoffs thus far. But as we start to think about and recap on this Bills win over the Chiefs, and thinking about what your biggest takeaway is from this game, BFLO Mafia News comes in with a Gabe Davis is not coming back next year. Biggest takeaway. I did see his mom talking on Twitter about how when he's an afterthought, he doesn't get the ball. 0 catches in the game for Gabe Davis. And going into the game, really, statistically, he had the best matchup of any of the Bills pass catchers in this game. We talked about in the pregame how statistically the Chiefs are pretty solid across the board against wide receiver 1s, wide receiver 3s, which are the slot, according to DVOA metrics, tight ends and running backs out of the backfield, and wide receiver 2s, the Chiefs were only 24th. So a game where Gabe Davis potentially could have made more of an impact, but ultimately, and we'll get to this when we kind of get into the Bills offense, the receivers in general for the Bills didn't really have much, a huge impact in this game outside of a Deontay Hardy catch. And we'll get to that as well. Gary says defense with many missing held KC to 17 points. And I'm guessing that is Gary's biggest takeaway from this game. And that's a big one, right? I do think that you can consider the defensive performance potentially for what they did to the Chiefs, holding them to 17 points. I put out a tweet earlier documenting sort of what the Chiefs did on their drives in this game when they had the ball, and I'll get to that when we talk about the Bills' defense. But man, to hold the Chiefs to 17 points in Arrowhead, I know they didn't have Pacheco, but obviously the Bills severely undermanned on defense as well. So an interesting, an interesting point there. FAKC says refs bailed out the Bills, so we might as well talk about that here in a second. Renaissance Man, always appreciate his his interactions here on the show. He says, my biggest takeaway is hearing McDermott's defense failed and was bailed out by the call. The man can't get any credit at all. 1 pick, 1 sack, 1 fumble recovery, 8 QB hits, and gave the ball back to the offense a lot. And I know Renaissance Man and I were like agreeing on Twitter earlier today because we're like the defense, 10 drives, 10 drives for the Chiefs, 4 punts, 2 turnovers, 1 turnover, 1 downs, 3 scoring drives for the Chiefs, and only amounted to 17 points for them. And it was a huge takeaway. And so for me, I guess my biggest takeaway for this game is really maybe something we haven't really considered as of late with this team, and that's winning a game against a good team while not playing your best. The Bills have won a couple games against very subpar teams, close games while not playing their best. Tampa Bay and the Giants come to mind, and they've lost games while not playing their best. Obviously, games against Denver, games against New England, But going into Arrowhead and not playing your best game, right? It was not the Bills' best game by any means, right? They did have the turnover. They did have some questionable in-game management again, right? They did have a fortunate occurrence where a guy lined up offsides and the penalty was called and it did erase a possible game-changing play. We did have a situation at the end of the game where the Bills once again failed to score a touchdown and had to settle for 3. But really, to go into that game and to win on the road in a game that wasn't your best performance, but a good enough performance to beat a really good team on the road, to me, that's the takeaway heading now into the rest of the games on the Bills' schedule, showing that they can go on the road, showing that they can win a lower scoring game, showing that they have a couple different ways to attack teams now, with Joe Brady at the helm. And we'll talk about Joe Brady here in a second when we get to the offense. But, and of course, the defense, yes, the penalty at the end, but really for the entirety of the game, including the second half, did play really well. And we had seen in recent weeks where the defense has kind of just collapsed in late game moments. And I mean, technically, that did not happen in this game. So a good takeaway there in that regard. So, before we get to the offense, I'll give my take on sort of the offsides thing since everyone seems to have their viewpoint on it. And my main thing here is this: the penalty and the flag was thrown when the ball was snapped. Okay. Tony's lining up offsides. The officials don't know how that play is going to turn out. Okay. The flag is thrown at the snap. If the flag is thrown at the snap and Patrick Mahomes throws an incomplete pass or the Chiefs run the ball for 2 or 3 yards, we're not having this conversation, right? No one's having this conversation. The reason people are having this conversation is because how the play turned out after the flag had already been thrown. Flag's thrown at the snap. This isn't a flag that was thrown, late after the play was over and it somehow took something away from the Chiefs. This is a flag that was thrown at the snap. Regardless of what happened on the play, it was going to be called. It would have been more ridiculous for the referee, for the officials to pick up the flag after seeing the play when it was clearly a penalty. And I think Bills fans would have had a bigger gripe with that happening than what actually happened on the field. So to me, we really need to realize that this penalty was called before the play panned out as it did. And for that reason, I just don't have any sympathy for the outcome. Like it happened, right? And it happened after the flag was thrown. So that's where I'll leave it. It was a snap penalty. The guy was clearly offsides. It was clearly a penalty, and they called it. So to me, yes, they expect it, whatever. They can expect whatever they want. You've seen the clips come out now. Tony glances over for less than a second. We don't know what happened with the referees. Andy Reid came out today and said he did not check with the officials. So there's a little bit of conflicting reporting there. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs have been on the beneficiary side of many calls, notably in the Super Bowl, that we'll see, right? Maybe shouldn't have been called, should have been called. The problem you have here is you cannot take circumstance and outcomes out of, or consider circumstance and outcomes as part of whether or not you are going to call a penalty. Okay. Defensive holding, illegal contact on the opposite side of a play where the ball's going is called. It's called all the time. It happens. You can't start going down this spiral, this rabbit hole of calling penalties or not calling penalties on the basis of whether or not you think it affected the outcome of a play, because then you're going down a really slippery slope. And Ryan Talbot, I thought his tweet he said earlier was great. He's talking about like if the Bills had 12 men on the field on the Denver field goal and had no impact on the outcome of the play, should the refs have picked up the flag? No, it was a penalty. The Bills had 12 men on the field. It's a penalty every time. These formation penalties, these men on the field penalties, these are very black and white penalties for officials to make. These aren't really subjective, right? If there's 12 men on the field, it's a penalty. If you line up offsides, it's pretty clear that you're offsides. It's a penalty. It's not like pass interference or other things or holding, maybe even where it's a little bit more subjective. Like offsides and men on the field are probably the easiest penalties for officials to call because it's so clear cut, right? And this was a clear cut penalty, and as Renaissance Man here says, like, especially since Kansas City has calls like that go like that in their favor for years. And Roy, I mean, this is true too. The officials have burned every team in the league, and the officiating across the board, I agree, has been bad this year. But I don't think we can conflate the bad officiating all year with a correct call that was made in this circumstance that happened to be on a play that played out that ended up with a crazy touchdown that was called back, right? Again, so the outcomes here should not dictate whether or not we feel like the calls were good or not. So yeah, as Bob says here, the player caused the outcome. So ultimately, that's what it is. And so that's where I'll leave it. I'll move on and we'll kind of get to now talking about the offense here. On a day where the Bills ran for 118 yards, Josh Allen threw for 233 yards, added his own 32 yards on the ground, and the offense did enough, right? Got out to the early lead. Beautiful touchdown pass from Josh Allen to James Cook early in the game. Feel like the offense was really kind of in a pretty good rhythm early in the game. I know they had, a couple, they had a couple punts, obviously, but it felt like the offense was in control early in the game. And, you start to look at sort of the breakdown here of some of the high level statistics in this game. The Bills held the ball for over 35 minutes in this game, only allowed the Chiefs on their side to have 10 possessions in 24 and change minutes of possession. That's a testament to the Bills' offense, really holding the ball a lot. 73 plays for the Bills on offense to only 62 for the Chiefs, 327 yards. Again, Chiefs came in with a really good pass D. The Bills Josh Allen still able to throw for 233 yards in this game. We'll start with Josh Allen, right? I mean, he did have his typical Josh Allen, like, what are you doing type of throw on that interception. But ultimately, again, he was the best player on the field. And you start to think about the box score and you look at the box score and you go, oh, Josh Allen was only 23 for 42 for 233 yards, like, and a touchdown and an interception. Yeah, he had 32 rushing yards and but it doesn't really seem that great. But then you start to think about all of the little moments and really big moments and plays that he made in this game that were just really game-changing type plays. So the scramble to get the Bills to the 4th and 1, the play then right after to have the defender freeze and be too scared to chase after him that he's able to kind of pump fake 2 or 3 times, throw it sidearm, and convert to Dalton Kincaid on that 4th down. The touchdown run where he gets pushed into the end zone from like 6-7 yards out, and actually fortunate, in my opinion, that the officials didn't blow that dead for forward progress. They let it go, and Josh Allen ends up scoring. The play on the sideline to where he's almost out of bounds and flips it to Latavius Murray over the defender's head. Plays like that stand out on a day where the offense didn't necessarily have their best day. Like we said, like I said in the opening, the Bills didn't have their best day today, but they did enough and they made enough plays to give themselves a chance, and they kind of kept the Chiefs at bay. Went up 7-0, went up 17-7, then we're up 17-14. Obviously, the Chiefs tied it, then went up 20-17. They always they always kind of had the Chiefs at bay. The Chiefs never had the lead in this game, and that really was the offense doing just enough, really. And again, not their best day, but Josh Allen again kind of leading the way there. So let's go kind of now through some of the other players on the offense. James Cook, obviously a big talking point, I think, after the game, right? Was James Cook was involved early in this game, especially in the passing game, was running well, and then seems like the Bills went away from him. Then Joe Brady in his, in his press conference said, well, we didn't really go away from it. A lot of this had to do with the Chiefs picking up their pressure rates, blitzing more, Josh having fewer time in the pocket. They use Latavius Murray a little bit more for pass protection, as Andrew says there in the comments section. And so the Bills had to change up their strategy a little bit. They did, get Cook back in near the end in some moments there towards the latter stages of the second half. But ultimately, another fine performance from James Cook, averaging 5.8 on the ground, led the team in receiving yards, and obviously had the great touchdown reception. And then the other nice reception down the sideline on a touch pass from Josh Allen that looked very similar to the play that he dropped against the Eagles, made the catch this time. And it was a big play for the Bills there. James Cook now on the season, he's got 789 rushing yards on the season to go along with his 391 receiving yards. So he's over 1,000 receiving, rushing yards combined. And I don't know, like, I want to hear from you all. Like, is this in line with your expectations for what you were hoping for James Cook this year? Is it less? Is it more? I think for me, it's like kind of right there what I was hoping for, and maybe exactly what my expectations were, right? I wasn't the guy that was sitting here saying, oh, James Cook's going to run for 1,500 yards and add another 500 receiving. But I also wasn't the guy that said this was going to be a true split backfield. I think he's doing great. He's near the top of the league in rushing yards. And I think that the Bills have really found something. And it seems like every time we have a game where Romo and Nance are calling it, and Romo likes to point this out as well, that the Bills can run the ball. They're very efficient at running the ball this year. Like I said, 118 on the ground in this game, averaging 4.2 on the ground in this game against the Chiefs rush defense that could have been attacked, right? And it was a talking point in the pregame. So James Cook, a nice game for him. The wide receivers in this game, a disappointment. The question I want to ask the comment section: how concerned are you with Stephon Diggs right now? Some drops for him lately. Is it that he's just pressing maybe a bit? Couple maybe subpar outings in a row for him. I will say personally, my concern level is low with Stephon Diggs. Receivers in this game only combined for 7 catches for 70 yards on Josh's 23 completions. The longest reception of the day from receivers was Deontay Hardy's big catch later in the game, the 25-yard catch for a key first down was the long of the day for the receivers. 1 catch for him. Shakir, 1 catch. And Sherfield, 1 catch. You start to look at the box score here and you see Deontay Hardy, 1 catch. Khalil Shakir, 1 catch. Sherfield, 1 catch. And then Diggs with 4. Gabe Davis with 0 catches in this game, as we pointed out, although he was wide open on a play. And that's been the talk of social media here in the last couple hours, was Josh Allen missing that, missing that wide open play to Diggs. Charles says, it's more of a Josh problem if we're being honest. Roy jokingly says, Diggs will be a great number 2 next year. That's pretty funny. I like that. Pop says, I don't think they should use Diggs for the screen. Throw those to Shakir or Hardy. That's an interesting conversation. They did throw that play a lot in this game. I think they like Diggs' toughness and his ability to kind of eke out that extra yard or two, but I also do think it does put a strain on him, and it does probably put him in a situation where that's where he's taking most of his hits on those types of plays. I would not hate seeing Shakir or Hardy involved in those types of plays a little bit more. But this again is something that Joe Brady's going to have to work through over the next couple weeks, right? Like they they are going to need Stephon Diggs in a big way against the Dallas Cowboys looking ahead, and we'll get to that a bit later on. But Gabe Davis with 0 catches. It is I think it's been a frustrating season for him. He's had good moments, but the more that this is playing out, the more it looks like the Bills, I don't think they can justify paying Gabe Davis top dollar, nor do I think they have the financial ability to do so, right? With a bunch of other guys that are going to be free agents as well. The Bills are going to be in an interesting situation in this offseason on what to do with Gabe Davis. I don't know. My gut tells me he's not going to be back. And I just don't feel like with the way he's been used this year, is it more of the Bills don't really know how to get their wide receiver 2 involved, or is it more of a Gabe Davis problem? It's quite interesting conversation. Um, Roy says, I never thought I would say this, but I wish we had kept McKenzie and not signed Hardy. Yeah, I mean, I guess like maybe they would have been more comfortable. Maybe it would have been more easier to find some ways to get a guy like McKenzie involved just because he had been with the system. But I think they thought that Hardy had a higher ceiling. Um, and Renaissance Man says so confusing why he isn't utilized more. I agree with that. It's just it's a little bit of an issue, right? The Bills have been struggling to kind of get consistency from that secondary wide receiver, whether it's Davis. Shakir's had that stretch of good games, but obviously this game wasn't a great game for the receivers overall. And it just, you hope that was more of a matter of matchup than anything, because obviously the Chiefs have done a really good job against opposing wide receivers for the better part of the year. But again, you don't want this to really become a trend, right? This is the thing. You don't want a position that should have been a strength for you to now all of a sudden become a question mark week to week. So again, this is something that we'll just have to keep an eye on. But as I said, my concern level for Diggs right now is low. My concern level for the rest of the group is what it is. I think like we made this comment a couple weeks ago as far as it's not going to be the same guy every week. Like one week it might be Shakir, one week it might be Davis. This week it was really none of them. And so that kind of segues me into talking about the tight ends. And in reality, like the tight ends were outside of the running backs, the main beneficiary of the passing game in this game, right? You had 8 combined catches for Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. So that's over a third of Josh Allen's completions going to the tight end position. Dawson Knox second on the team with 36 yards, behind Cook, who had led the team with 83 receiving yards. Knox catching all 3 of his targets, 3 for 36. We said in the pregame that if Josh threw the ball over 40 times and he threw it 42 times, there was a good likelihood with Dawson Knox coming back that he would get 4 to 5 targets, and he got 3 targets. So not bad, not a bad first game back for Dawson Knox. Made a couple nice catches. He got hit on a couple of those catches as well and held on to the ball. So all in all, I would say a positive return for Dawson Knox. And then Kincaid, the yardage numbers maybe weren't there, 5 for 21, but second on the team in targets behind Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs, 11 targets, only caught the ball 4 times. Dalton Kincaid, 8 targets, 5 catches for 21 yards, with only a long of 8 for him. So a tough, just a tough day receiving wise for for everyone, but the tight ends were definitely more utilized than or I would say slightly better utilized than the receivers in this game. I will say this. There was a lot of chatter, with Knox coming back. Was that going to take away from Kincaid? Was that going to take away from Shakir? I mean, it is quite clear now, right? We can all agree that Dalton Kincaid is the number 2 option, has established himself as the number 2 option in the passing game. James Cook aside on games where maybe he de facto is the number 2 option in the passing game, but outside of the running backs, Dalton Kincaid has really established himself as the number 2 option in the passing game behind Stephon Diggs. And I think that's a good thing for the Bills, having guys like Gabe Davis and Dawson Knox and Khalil Shakir as kind of like your 3rd, 4th, 5th options. I welcome Dawson Knox back. I'm glad he's back. I think the Bills will really need him for the home stretch of the season to kind of try to find something on offense, a little bit more consistency. And look, I know the Bills had scored 30 plus in the 2 games prior to this, but I never would have thought 20 points would have won this game. So, just an overall tough day, but again, enough. And so that leads to the final thing I want to talk about on the offense, and that's the offensive line. Probably one of the tougher games the offensive line has had this year. Josh Allen sacked 3 times in this game, had only been sacked 15 times total in the 12 games prior to that. So really just a little over 1 per game, sacked 3 times this game. I did feel like, and I rewatched the game earlier today, the protection struggled in this game overall. Early on, it was holding up. Later in the game, the pass protection was struggling, and the Bills obviously had a couple holding calls as well. And it was one of those things that you're like, man, that was maybe the toughest game the line has had from a pass protection standpoint. From a run blocking standpoint, I thought they did a pretty good job. But in pass pro, they struggled, I thought, and that's something that we need to keep an eye on. Hopefully, that's just like a one game situation. The Chiefs are one of the top sack teams in the league. They do have obviously the good pass rush and good interior pass rush with Jones, and they do have Dana and Karlaftis on the edge. So it's a good pass rushing team, the Chiefs. But I mean, Josh was running for his life on more than one occasion in escaping the pocket, and sometimes, in some cases, almost immediately. So again, solid day for the offensive line, I thought, in run blocking, pass protection, a little suspect. But let's talk now about the defense a little bit and sort of look, the defense is going to there are going to be people out there who are going to still be disappointed in this defense because they're going to say without that offsides penalty on Kadarius Toney, the defense collapsed again in the later stages of the game. While that is probably a somewhat fair statement to make, the fact of the matter is that that wasn't going to end the game. The Bills at that time would have still had 3 timeouts and 1:12 on the clock. So again, yes, it was a struggle, but ultimately this defense, again, Kansas City, 10 drives on the day, only 24 minutes and change of possession. 10 drives for Kansas City resulted in 4 punts, 2 turnovers, a turnover on downs, and 3 scores that only amounted to 17 points. I think by and large, we can say the defense did its part and maybe more than its part in this game. Not to mention the 2 takeaways, AJ Epinesa with the big interception early that kind of shifted momentum a little bit back for the Bills. And obviously the fumble recovery as well, which, the Bills did somewhat squander that, but it does stop the Chiefs from a scoring drive ultimately. And the Bills defense really to hold Kansas City to 17 points in Arrowhead is good no matter what you say. I don't care if the Chiefs offense has been struggling. I don't care if the Chiefs offense was missing Isaiah Pacheco. I don't care if the Chiefs wide receivers stink. They are still at home. They still have Travis Kelce. They still have Patrick Mahomes. They still have talented players on that offense. They still have a really good offensive line. And the Bills held that team to 17 points. Renaissance Man says, my argument is that they play hard for 4 full quarters. I will give them New York Jets, New England, Denver. I have nothing to say in those games because the D folded at the end. And they did play hard for 4 quarters. And it sucks about AJ Epinessa's injury. It's a rib injury. The news today that it's a week-to-week injury. So it's probably going to be the case that he's not going to play against Dallas. I mean, I don't want to speculate too far, but it certainly seems like he's not going to play against the Cowboys. So the Bills are really going to need to get more out of Von Miller. And Von Miller, do I say he did show some flashes in this game. So off the field stuff aside, it's not like Von Miller had some huge box score day, but affected some plays. It looked like he had a little bit of juice back in this game. Ed Oliver was a monster in the middle. The Bills still have a little bit of an issue in the middle sometimes on some of these run plays, but by and large, I think the defense did its part, and man, the secondary did its part too. Held Kelce into a relatively modest game for him, 80 plus yards for him, but not really impactful in the red zone for Kelce. There weren't too many I like to use the term hollow yards. There was a lot of hollow yards, I thought, for Kelce. Some first downs and such, but there weren't any game changing plays from Travis Kelce or this Chiefs receiving core. Offside penalty negated aside, there weren't really those game changing plays that Patrick Mahomes tends to make regularly, right? Just like Josh Allen does. So for that, I commend the defense a lot. And yes, there were some things that we need to talk about, right? It was not a perfect game for this defense. The tackling was not great early on. A lot of missed tackles. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was making a lot of guys miss early in the game. But ultimately, they did what they had to do to kind of take the ball away and prevent the Chiefs from scoring. So they did come up when they needed to. I think their defensive performance probably would have been overshadowed had that call gone had that call not been made at the end. Probably wouldn't have been talking about how good of a game this defense really played. And another really solid game from Taron Johnson. I think Taron Johnson is maybe the most not talked about. I don't know if he's a superstar, but the most not talked about great player in the NFL. He's up on the list somewhere. I mean, he is phenomenal, and for all the losses the Bills have had on the defensive side of the ball for injury, he's been really steady this year. He's had maybe a game or two where he hasn't been his best, but a Bills team that really isn't the best at tackling at times. He came up and he made some nice plays in this game early in the game on a 3rd and 12, made a sure tackle to ensure that the Chiefs weren't going to convert a 3rd and long. And so, yeah, I think a nice game for Taron Johnson in this one. The Chiefs held to, again, only 82 yards on the ground, 345 total yards, 10 total drives, as we mentioned. They were 6 for 12 on 3rd down, which is obviously above average of what you like to give up, but 6 for 12 on 3rd down, 0 for 1 on 4th downs at the end of the game, obviously. And they only got to Patrick Mahomes once, but the Bills defense doing what they needed to do in this game. The 2 turnovers were big. And again, even though the Bills offense didn't necessarily capitalize specifically on those immediate drives following the turnovers, they did prevent Kansas City from scoring. And in those types of games, that's a win. Late and long is an issue. 3rd and 2 is great. 3rd and 17 is huge problem, says Charles. Yeah, I mean, is it sad that we almost feel more comfortable when it's 3rd and 4 than when it's 3rd and 12? That's sad, I feel like, but that just seems like we are the team that gives up these third and 12s, these 3rd and 17s or whatever they are. I mean, it's just it's just tough. Charles also says defense is consistent, though always hot and cold, and like it's funny, right? The defense has really started out games well for the most part. It's at the ends of games where they've really kind of folded and, kind of gone into a shell. And I don't mean that from a schematic standpoint. I mean it from like a figure of speech standpoint, that they've kind of gone into a shell and gotten tight late in games. And this game, look, the Chiefs had a fourth and 15 at the end. How many of you were expecting like they're gonna convert this? They're gonna like it's just been what this team has done this year. And so it was nice for that not to happen this game for sure. Um, like I said, the story going forward now is going to be a couple stories right on that defensive line. And obviously, injuries, I think, are again a talking point for the defense after this game. Micah Hyde leaves with another stinger. He was on the sideline after that. He was in good spirits, obviously, after the Bills had won. He was standing right next to Sean McDermott. I don't know what that means for an injury standpoint for him going forward. I don't know. We'll see about Micah Hyde. I thought Taylor Rapp played okay yesterday in his absence. AJ Epinesa, we know, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, week to week with a rib injury, wouldn't expect him for this Dallas game. And then Von Miller still coming back from his injury. It's now just over a year since that injury took place. Again, thought he had a little bit of juice in this game. The Bills could really use that this upcoming week against the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott. But the Bills may have to activate Kingsley Jonathan. The Bills might have to activate Kingsley Jonathan this week against Dallas if AJ Epinesa is out, which I imagine will be the case. So will be interesting to see what happens there. Otherwise, the Bills came out of this game fairly clean injury wise. There was some concern about Dalton Kincaid, who had taken a shot, but he was in the locker room saying he was fine. Looked like he's fine for this after this one. So that looks okay. The rest of the defense, linebackers, secondary, I thought played a good game. Rasul Douglas, another good game from him. Terrell Bernard, good game. The biggest thing for the Bills defense right now, I think, is tackling. They're a high-speed unit, so missed tackles are always going to be kind of a collateral damage to a team that plays sort of downhill speed type personnel. But it was nice to see Greg Rousseau kind of get back to form a little bit in this one. And it was nice to see that, in a few weeks where he's been relatively quiet, that he actually did make a pretty nice impact on this game, including, by the way, some nice coverage down the sideline on the pass play to, I think it was Clyde Edwards-Helaire down the far sideline. So overall, I mean, I think you really got to give credit to the defense, and ultimately, call or not at the end, they held the Chiefs to 17 points. Those are the facts. And I'm not trying to say that there aren't issues still to be cleaned up, but for at least one game, they did do their part. And as Renaissance Man says here, Groot looks healthy and ready to go. Yeah, I know he's been battling that foot thing for a while, and for a guy his size, that type of injury, I'm sure it's probably takes a long time to heal fully, right? And you're going out there every week putting all that weight on that foot, and I don't know medically if that aggravates it or if it makes the healing process longer. I'm not a doctor, I don't know, but I can't imagine it's great for his foot, right? So the bye week clearly looks like it helped Groot quite a bit here, and hopefully getting him back. So Groot and Leonard Floyd and Von Miller look like they're going to be the three guys coming up this week against Dallas. So the big ones to watch out for, I think, this upcoming week, injury-wise on the defense. Micah Hyde, what's the story going to be with him with that stinger, and AJ Epinesa, which we presume will be out for Dallas. But if it's a week-to-week thing for Epinesa, the Chargers are on the horizon. Justin Herbert may not be there for that game. Sounds like they're debating whether or not he's going to need surgery. Hopefully, maybe it's only like a 2-week absence for AJ Epinesa and he comes back. I don't know. That's just speculation, but let's hope it's not too long of an absence for him. Okay, on to special teams. An interesting day on special teams, right? It was, I think, a tale of two sides of special teams, right? I think number one, the bad. The Bills' coverage units have not been great. I think it's been the weakest part of their special teams unit this year. The Chiefs getting good field position on a couple different punt returns. I don't love the coverage units right now for the Bills. I think it's been a struggle. I don't think their special teams overall units, coverage wise, and return units have been great this year. Some of that's personnel, but I think a lot of that comes down to just, to be honest, coaching. I wouldn't mind seeing the Bills try to look for an alternative special teams coordinator in the offseason. I don't think a change is going to happen in season, but I wouldn't mind seeing a change. I would not mind seeing a change at that coaching spot, right? I do think that Matthew Smiley, I mean, he's really the only coordinator left, right, from the original core of McDermott, Frazier, Dorsey, Smiley, right? I don't love the special teams unit, but again, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen in season. On the kicking game, I actually thought was a positive for the Bills in this game. Obviously, Bass made both of his field goals and made both of his extra points. That was nice. The first extra point was a little iffy. He did sneak it in side the right upright, and then both of his field goals were Renaissance man. What's Bobby April up to these days? And I thought Sam Martin had a decent day punting. A bit of a bad break on the one punt where Saraniel kind of punched it back and gave the Chiefs a couple, like 7 or 8 extra yards. But I think a good bounce back game from Sam Martin, averaged 46 yards a punt in this one, 46.5 yards a punt in this one, which was a nice effort from him. And then had it wasn't quite a coffin corner, but it was like, I'll call it the sideline corner, where he did punt it, to the sideline, got maximum distance out of it, and didn't allow the Chiefs to return that punt later in the game. So I think a good day from the kicking side of special teams for the Bills. And so that was nice to see. It was nice to see the special teams sort of hold up on the kicking side. Deontay Hardy, a couple returns on punts, but really nothing of consequence. 8.5 return, only 17 yards. Not killing you, just doing what he needs to do there, but nothing really of note. Okay. Before we take a look ahead at what's to come for the Bills beyond week 14, we'll take a quick listen from Greg and Aaron on what you can do to support Cover One.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
All right. So there is Aaron and Greg talking about how you can support us here at Cover One by signing up for the Cover One Pass. All right, let's take a quick look ahead at what's to come here for the Bills and really the rest of the landscape of the AFC here in Week 15. Um, Obviously, it goes without saying a huge week ahead for the Bills, and it's going to start early. An interesting schedule, right? For Week 15, we've got 3 Saturday games, and really all of these games matter for the Bills. You look at and even really the Thursday night game, right? The Chargers and the Raiders. One of those teams going to drop to 5-9. The other is going to kind of keep their playoff hopes alive and get back to 6-8. But without Justin Herbert, the Raiders will have a chance in that game, and the Chargers have not looked good lately. Losing a couple, uh, losing a couple, um, a couple bad games in their last few weeks. So I know they beat, the Patriots 6-0 or whatever, but at the end of the day, like they just, yeah, they're not an impressive team to me. Prior to beating the Patriots, had lost 3 in a row and then just lost to the Broncos handily. So I don't know. The Chargers, Raiders, I feel like those two teams probably not really in any serious threat of threatening for a playoff spot. But then you look at the other 2 games that are taking place on Saturday, and you've got the Vikings at the Bengals at 1:00. The Bengals with a big win over the Colts this past weekend at home for the Bengals. Browning has looked pretty decent for them, filling in for Joe Burrow, and that Bengals team is not going away quietly, even without Joe Burrow. The Vikings really looked bad yesterday against the Raiders. That game was 0-0 until late in the fourth quarter. Justin Jefferson got hurt again. Now, Kevin O'Connell thinks Justin Jefferson's going to be back for this game, potentially to play against the Bengals. And as a Bills fan, we are hoping Justin Jefferson is back for that game because it would be huge if the Minnesota Vikings could go on the road and beat the Cincinnati Bengals at Paycor Stadium. Then you've got the matchup in the middle at 4:30, the Steelers and the Colts, both teams at 7-6, both teams with the same conference record. So the schedule or the tiebreak then goes to games against common opponents. And right now, it looks like the Steelers have the tiebreak over the Colts in that regard, but not sure what that means for the Bills as they're so far down there in 11th. In any case, one of those teams is going to drop to 7-7. And look, I would think it's better for the Bills, honestly, if the Steelers probably win that game, just because I think the Colts have a little bit of an easier schedule down the road. So if the Steelers can win, there's maybe a better chance that the Steelers then lose a few games after that. We'll see. But again, one of those teams outside of a tie will drop to 7-7. And then the late game on Saturday, the Denver Broncos go to Detroit to take on the struggling Detroit Lions. Now the Lions get to go back home. Jared Goff and crew have historically in the last couple seasons he's been much better at home. So we got to hope that the Detroit Lions at home can bounce back and take care of the Denver Broncos at Ford Field. And then you start looking at the rest of the slate. On Sunday, the Bears go to Cleveland. So Joe Flacco will be playing quarterback for the Browns. That's at Cleveland. The Bears look pretty good against the Lions this past week. Could use a Bears win over the Browns. You got the Texans at the Tennessee Titans. Titans really doing their thing tonight, up 10-7 against the Miami Dolphins right now at the half. The Tennessee Titans aren't going to go away quietly either, even though they're likely out of the playoff mix. They are. They're not going to give up easy wins. They're going to fight. And, the Texans may be without CJ Stroud at quarterback. Concussion protocol. Good chance he's not playing in that game. Could the Titans do the Bills a favor and take out the Houston Texans? You got the Jets at Miami. You got the Chiefs at the Patriots, which Patriots are eliminated. from playoff contention. And then other than that, the only other AFC game you have on the slate is Baltimore at Jacksonville, which, I mean, at the end of the day, probably doesn't really matter too much for the Bills. I think both of those teams are probably firmly in the playoffs. As it is, the Jags are likely going to win the AFC South, and looks like the Ravens are likely going to win the AFC North. So maybe that game is more about potential seeding ramifications. Should the Bills be able to get back into a playoff spot here in the next week or so? But really, the big games on Saturday, and then big games for we're really NFC North fans this upcoming weekend. If you're the Bills, you got the Vikings you're rooting for, you got the Lions you're rooting for, and you got the Bears you're rooting for. So ultimately, we are NFC North fans this upcoming week. If you are a Bills fan and needing some things to break the Bills' way, but ultimately, the Bills themselves have a tall and monumental task on their hands as well, getting to play the Dallas Cowboys fresh off a beatdown of the Philadelphia Eagles. Dallas obviously playing that game at home. This game, Dallas travels to Buffalo, and the Bills get a nice match, a nice late season home game against a tough opponent where the Bills have very few. I think this is they only have one other home game after this, and that's the Patriots. So again, the Bills ending the season with 3 of their last 5 on the road. This Cowboys game being their one of 2 home games left, the Patriots being the other one in a couple weeks. So again, this game's interesting, right? Because the Bills really probably need to run the table to guarantee themselves a playoff spot. But if there was any game where they could afford to lose of the last 4 games, this would be the one, because it's an NFC opponent, right? Now, I'm not saying they should lose the game, obviously, but if the Bills were able to win their other 3 AFC games and they were happen to lose to Dallas, they could still be 10-7 and potentially sneak in to the playoffs. But ultimately, we want the Bills to win this game, obviously, and we'll get more into those key matchups. Dak Prescott in the MVP conversation, whether you like it or not, he is in the conversation. A really good matchup. Obviously, the last time the Bills played the Cowboys, they took care of business in that Thanksgiving game a couple years back. Now Dallas comes to Buffalo to play the Bills on Sunday in the late slot, 4:25. So we'll have that pregame show for you on Sunday morning, getting you ready for Bills Cowboys on Sunday. So that pretty much wraps up our show for tonight. Thank you for sticking with me tonight. These shows are always tough to do solo, but I appreciate you all sticking with me tonight and really having a good buzz there in the comments section. And I appreciate all the comments from all of you. Let's go watch the second half of this Dolphins-Titans game and hope that the Dolphins, or the Titans, I should say, can somehow hold on and give us a nice a win tonight over the Miami Dolphins, and maybe keep those AFC East hopes alive for the Buffalo Bills. But a lot of football still to be played. 4 games left in the season. The season is absolutely flying by. I can't even believe it. Seems like just yesterday we were talking about the draft and such, but that's how it goes. The NFL is great, and the season just always tend to fly by. But I want to thank you all again. Thanks for joining me tonight, and I really appreciate it. Until next time, go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section, and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!